Hello, everyone, and hello, world. It is so beautiful to be with you again on these monthly calls of conversations. And I am so excited about today's call. It's an unusual kind of call that happened out of pure synchronicity. My beloved friend here in Kansas City, a Unity minister, Sandra Campbell, was headed to Vancouver, Canada. And I said, "Oh, wow, that's where Marvin Anderson was from." And so the first thing I said to her was, ask Janet and ask her if she knew Marvin and if she knew Jim Bollett. Well, synchronicity with the event happening in Vancouver brought me into a relationship with Janet today. And Janet is just an amazing soul. She has an incredible, incredible, and vast background of her own with and without Unity. Um, I want to talk more about her background with Unity and how it has impacted her entire life. And so that's sort of going to be some of the focus of the questions that I lead in with her. She's been studying and working with some of the great Unity ministers and also great teachers that are not Unity ministers that I also have studied and worked with. Another example of synchronicities, just popping all, and we may actually extend those synchronicities into another call. We'll see how that goes along, and how spirit directs it. I'm looking forward to it. If it happens, that won't happen until March because we already have February scheduled. So, once more, welcome everyone and hello, world. It is so beautiful having you here today. One of the things I realize is that the calls that we are doing, called simply Conversations with Marj, are actually calls that are about 3 moments in time. It's about this now moment. It's about what's going on currently in our lives in this date in 2025. It's also about past as part of now, past as part of this present moment. And you'll hear that in some of the questions I asked Janet about her childhood and her knowing Marvin Anderson, who was the person who is the subject of the third chapter of my book, The Key to Everything. He brought me into, without me being aware of what was going to happen, into my first experience of awakened shift, a shift into knowing something vaster than myself. He was teaching about the 7 days of creation metaphysically for Unity. He was my seminary teacher. And he said, "This is the key to everything. This is the key to everything, and we do not understand it yet." All of a sudden, I felt that shift. I felt myself going into timelessness. And I'm wanting to have some of you interested and seeing if some of you experience some of those shifts today. I call them oh my God moments. Oh my God, that's happened to me. That's part of my life. Oh my God. And it's also, these calls are also about future time. It's recorded history. They didn't have Zoom in the days of Marvin Anderson and my relationship. I couldn't even find any pictures of him that even resembled the Marvin that I knew. Interesting. Now we have something called Zoom. now we have the ability to record the present moment for future time. So thank you, everyone, for being part of this experience. And Janet Law, I am so delighted to have you here today. So let's start with our usual format when we talk about 4 stages of our life. You actually were born in 1961 with the astrological sign of Virgo, which I'm at this point in my life becoming interested in. Never had been, never took it seriously. Virgo, as I get to know you, has elements of exactly the Janet that I see. Passionate and purposeful and well organized. And so, Janet, um, tell us about a little about your childhood. And in the email that we sent out, the announcement email, we had 2 pictures from your childhood. And these were those pictures. And one is of you when you were 5 years old. The other one is of a person that you identified as your dear mother. In the picture, she was just 24. So tell us a little bit about your parents and how your father and mother met and how he took her to meet his parents. How does that influence, their influence in your life, reveal itself?
I'm so grateful, first of all, for this moment. And Marge, I just wanted to say, your book, Your Soul's Invisible Codes, I think what we're talking about here right now is it may appear invisible, but we make things visible in every action we take and everything we do. And if I look at my mother and father, they were very much being and action people. So my mother and father met in Ontario. They had been going together for a very long time, almost 4 years. Uh, my dad had a bit of a medical issue, a soul issue, which separated them for a period of time. And I know my father would be okay with me saying this, but he came from a family where alcohol was part of the equation. And so very early on, he was able to find a program in 12 steps. And as a result of that, my mother and him got back together. And that was a very, very beautiful thing. He met my mother after they had been separated on a train. And it was a very serendipitous event. And immediately they were drawn together again. And immediately, she became part of the family on the family farm. My grandfather was a potato farmer, was also very involved in the community. And so they went on to not only marry each other, but also to instill those rooted, I would say, family trees and branches that allowed them to then make a commitment to each other to move to the west coast of Canada and start their life together anew. And so I don't know if that gives you enough, but that's how they met.
That's beautiful, Janet. And it really is an example of synchronicity and shared values and meeting and sometimes separating and coming back together again. That has played itself in my life with Ed, for example. And interestingly, also, that same pattern, it played itself in Sandra Campbell's life. So, uh, often when we are destined to have an experience and be together for a time, if we're separated, we meet other people and have other experiences, including your father's alcoholism. And we learn lessons from those experiences, and then we may come back together and experience the fullness of the relationship again. It can be for a period of time, but this is the journey of the soul. It is the impact and the influences of the imprints of the soul and the destiny path of the soul. So you were born in
Vancouver.
Vancouver.
Yeah, born in Vancouver, and my two sisters, the family of five. And I do want to say this 12-step initiation is really the unity initiation as well. I believe those two are extremely connected. And so, yes, my mother and father raised three girls together, and they instilled very strongly family values of always a hand up, not a handout, always a hand up, to raise up the vibration in the home and to raise up the vibration with all those around them. It was beautiful to watch both of them and how they connected and were conduits and were communicators, I believe, of our own spiritual self in this human body. They were total examples of that.
That's profound. And I love your awareness of the 12 steps being an integral part of unity,
Yes.
because it was in so many ways. You and I have a shared mentor, and we haven't even talked about
Yeah.
this,
Yes.
but Jack Boland.
Yes.
And oh my God, that was an oh my God moment for me. Um, the minister of the largest church in the Unity movement at that time, and everything in it was based on 12 steps and his own awareness of 12-step recovery. He never said no to a person that came to him with uh, inquiring about the 12 steps, and worked in establishing a spiritual retreat center based on that.
Yes.
So uh, Jack was one of my key mentors. He was the person that asked me to become head of the church growth and development team that he had headed up. And then I headed it up in leadership. Um, and now the church of today that we knew has been sold. It's gone. And the Jack Boland has gone through the veils. And the ministry is now meeting in a high school, is the
Yes.
last I
Yes.
heard.
So transformation is always occurring. And Jack did speak about you, Marge. Jack was one of my mentors. He still is one of my mentors. I call to him quite often, actually. He was also a mentor to my father and also to the associate ministers that I worked with at the Unity Center in Vancouver for almost 10 years before Marvin came. So, I mean, we're doing a little bit of time slip here, but I have to say that there is such a strong connection between the two, which is how my father found unity. We had always gone to a church. I had perfect attendance as a young child. We all did. It was a very high value to get spiritual nourishment.
And
And
what was the
then,
church then?
pardon?
What was the church you went to then?
We actually went to the Anglican church because that was my mother's faith. My father was brought up united. And then my father came across a Unity magazine on his travels and found that there was a Unity church in Vancouver. And so he went one Sunday. He brought the rest of the family. I walked through the doors, and the minister at the time, Reverend Dale Newsom, who was just the most stalwart, most beautiful man, and his beloved Newsom, got down at eye level, looked me straight in the eye and said, I am so glad you are here. Let me let me take you downstairs and meet all of the other children. Now, that in a moment changed my life because I was in a place that understood my divine nature. I always knew God. I've always known the spirit and the divine within me, but that moment in time allowed the belonging at a whole new level. And I've never left.
Talk a little bit about some of your involvement in all of the things that Unity offered to children, uh,
Yes. So,
going
so,
into
so
the teen years and even ultimately into the young adult years.
Yeah, we were very, very fortunate to have extremely good mentor leaders within the children's church. And it was set up in a way that Myrtle Fillmore set up her whole, who's going to take care of the children? Well, you are Myrtle, but how are we going to do that? Well, it was very child-centered. So we gathered together in a group because that sense of circle of belonging is so important in in Irish, because I come from an Irish background, it's known as an anam cara. Anam means soul and cara means friend. And every time you are together in a circle, you are in an anam cara. And that's what I experienced. We then had our songs and our singing and joyfulness. And then we got to go to whatever area that was of interest to us. There was the science corner, there was the writing corner, there was the drama corner. So our self-expression of spirit was directly related to our own passion and longing to actually expand that. So at a very, very young age, I got to experience that. I then went into Uniteens, and then, of course, my formative teen years. I don't know if I would have survived my teen years had it not been for YOU, because it can be a very prickly time in our life where many things are happening within the human body, but also there is a lot of things that we are assessing, reassessing, establishing who we are, working with our egoic self, knowing that we are a spiritual being. So I attended every YOU conference, international conference, and many of those conference participants went on to become, Unity ministers, the Greg Barretts, the Rick Rogers. Like these were my peeps in our international Unity conferences. So the James Dillett Freemans, the Eric Butterworths, the Jerry Jampolsky. Before there was Course in Miracles, there was Love is Letting Go of Fear. They were bringing in the top, I would say, mentors and Unity leadership team that really understood not only the youth, but understood how we could expand this great movement called Unity. So I was extremely impacted by all of that. So the light that is burning constantly inside of us was lit everywhere. And I have to say, there were times in my teenage years where it got quite difficult, just as it does as a teenager. And had I not known those 5 basic principles, you know, God is, I am, I think, I pray, I live, had that not been a foundation with the 12 steps, because of course we were a 12-step family too, it it really caused my spiritual nature to be the most important thing in my life.
You told me a story about a song.
Yes, yes. Okay, I'll tell you that song. Um, so one of the honors was our YOU leaders were Bill and Christine Dexter. Bill and Christine Dexter are two people who were very well known in Vancouver because of their business and because of how they participated in the community. And they were our every Sunday leaders within our YOU group. Their son, John, was a musician and went on to become a great producer. He did for the movie Top Gun, Heaven in Your Eyes. Like he was a person who went on to do his passion. So when Jesus Christ Superstar was coming out at that time, we were all, dancing and singing and grooving to that. Well, he wrote his own rock opera, and he wrote it specifically with some of the YOUers in mind to play some of the parts. And it was kind of a story about a group of spiritual, spiritually inclined participants in this play. And then he wrote music. So he wrote a part for me, and I was the character Janet. And these are the words I remember that were so significant and stay with me till this day. And the lyric was, as he sang it to me, Janet, you've got the light. Your face is aglow and your love shines bright. So I'm giving that back to this group today, whoever you are, Ed and Garth and Marla and all these people. You are the light and your love shines bright.
And you remember the tone,
Oh,
the,
yeah.
you want
I
to
even
sing
have
it
a
for
picture.
us?
Yeah. Pardon?
You want to sing it for us?
Oh, I think, Janet, you've got the light. Your face is aglow and your love shines bright. There's more words to it, but that's just a little snippet.
Yeah. How, and you told me this was my first major shift
Yeah.
into a faster way
Yeah.
of doing. One moment in time, and it's in your childhood,
Yeah.
and it is about ignited by a song.
Yeah.
And I,
It was ignited when I walked through the doors with that minister, Dale, getting down and seeing that God was in me and I could see the God in him in a really powerful way. And then that next growth experience was that for sure.
so one of the things that I'm aware of is that you met Brian in 1981.
It
That tell us about that.
Well, I wasn't particularly expecting a relationship, but it was interesting. My sister and I used to go down to a neighborhood. It was kind of like music, and you could get a drink, and there was always live bands. And I love music. That's what I grew up with. I can Music is just such a big part of my life. So we went, and this man came over and he asked me to dance. And it was the first time ever that I'd ever kind of given someone my phone number in a place that was kind of a music and drinking establishment. Yeah, I kind of would back off a little bit. Anyways, and he called me the next day. We talked on the phone for 4 hours. And the moment that I met him, I knew that I was uh, going to marry him. And he felt the same way. So we went off into the world together. And he came to Unity. He was an agnostic. He grew up in church, but I think he said I mostly went just during my teenage years so I could meet some girls. And then I brought him one Sunday, and he always just couldn't wait to come back. And so we've together been on this spiritual path, which has taken us so many places on so many roads. And we like to go on the road less traveled rather than the one that's most trampled.
And I just saw Sandra Campbell arriving, and
Yes.
Sandra, we just talked about you.
Oh,
Yeah.
you did?
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I'm late. I had an appointment. I'm just heading home, so I'm driving.
Yeah.
Hi, Janet.
Hi,
Hi,
good to see you,
Marge.
Sandra. So glad you're here.
Good to see you too.
Good.
One of
So,
the synchronistic moments happening right now.
yeah, I call it, as Deepak Chopra says, synchrodestiny. It is synchrodestiny. And so Brian and I have been together since 81. We were married in 85. And so we're still together 44 years later and married 39. My mother and father would have been married 50 years. Both of them made their transition in 2009 within a few months of each other. They were soulmates as well. So yeah, well, there's a little history there for sure.
You have another thing in common with Myrtle Fillmore. you had a diagnosis and were told it was terminal and to go home and to get your things in order.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is in the late 1990s or early.
It's very interesting. It actually happened in 2001, which is, 24 years ago. It was a very aggressive diagnosis. It was a breast cancer diagnosis. And basically, you get put into a system that requires you to take action, requires you to understand the most important thing is to start your healing circle right away. Regardless of whatever a diagnosis might be for people, it was a chapter in my life. I never thought, oh my goodness, I'm on a spiritual path and look what I created, which is what quite a few people actually said, what did you do to create that? And I would just say, this is a chapter in my life. And for whatever reason, it's been put in front of me so that I will expand my spiritual nature. That's how I saw it. So I formed a team. I got the best that I could find in their field of expertise. So it started with prayer, always started with prayer, and then sought out those people who could assist me with treatments and interventions that would be helpful to me. So I was brought to a very world-renowned oncologist who understood that you don't treat cancer, you treat the person, and you look deep inside that person and go, okay, what can we do to complement this? So my RMT, my registered massage therapist, who was somewhat of a medical intuitive, said to me very early on, cancer cells are highly intelligent cells. They have learned to do something different in the body. And so what we're going to do is self-love, and we're going to bring all of that back together. We're going to do all of the things that we need to do to love, love, love. I will say this very emphatically. I never fought cancer. I never wanted to get into that duality. I loved my way in and I loved my way out. And whatever outcome, I accept the diagnosis, but not the prognosis. And I was real clear about that.
I have a very, very firm belief that love can heal
Mhm,
everything.
mhm, mhm,
Love can heal
mhm,
everything.
mhm,
There is no diagnosis that love cannot heal.
mhm.
And so I love the fact that you know that you've gone through some of the highs and the lows, some of the joy and some of the suffering. And so let's talk about Brian just a little bit more, your husband.
Yeah.
What was his profession?
Uh, Brian actually worked as a geological technician. He worked in mining and in that field. He went to a natural resource college facility in Eastern Canada and got his degree there. And then he went on to work in finance and he worked doing his securities course. And then he moved on to working in cars and helping people to find the best vehicle for them. And then went on to work for an international leasing company to help people find the vehicle that would get them from here to there.
And now he is retired.
Somewhat retired. He actually still does some of his financial um, sourcing for people, finding them insurance and different ways as somewhat of an advisor. But his real passion is people. And he's actually right now exploring going into counseling and to working within the healthcare system. And so he's quite excited about that.
And he also does technology work for
He
you.
does. He does. He is there every Sunday making sure those cameras are on point, making sure the sound. He is we have our different modalities, visual, he's a total auditory. I'm a total visual auditory, kinesthetic, like we have all of them, but he hears things. I see things super clear. He hears things super clear.
It's interesting how we bring together different people into our lives who are complements.
Yes.
And if we're open, we actually create a greater whole.
Oh, yes.
And, and your son, Brandon,
Yeah.
who's now almost 30, I think,
29. Yep.
and he has done some amazing things in his life.
Oh, yeah. Yes. He's uh he's a wandering troubadour, and he also has a real skill with his hands because that is something he loves to do as well. Um, Brandon came into the world an old soul. We never ever saw him anything other than the individual that he came into being. So, his growing up years were always, what is the correct schooling for him? What are we being called to do? And so we did seek out a lot of educational institutes that kind of offered that child-centered type of learning. He was also diagnosed as a gifted learner, so his understanding of his surroundings and what was around him was at a quite a high level, yet he never really that wasn't his thing to have that label. What his thing was communicating and being a conduit. Got out of high school, went straight to India, climbed the Annapurna Trail. He also had a medical diagnosis, which actually is said to be chronic for the rest of your life. He did that hike, and when he came back from that hike, he had no symptoms, and it's continued that way all these years. He's been to India 4 times. He's been to Guatemala. He's been to Mexico. He's right now in Thailand. He's been to Ireland. He's been everywhere, man. And we went to see the new Bob Dylan movie, and A Complete Unknown. I highly recommend that movie because Brandon is a sensitive like Bob Dylan was, and yet he's much more of extrovert. Bob Dylan was more of an introvert. Brandon is, yes, yeah, loves music, loves people, and
So one of the pictures in the announcement email that I sent is this one,
yeah,
and it has you and Brian and Brandon, and then
yeah,
there's another important person
yeah,
uh, there. Tell
yeah.
us about that.
Yeah, so that's Anthony Holland. Anthony Holland came from England. He worked at the Old Vic Bristol Theatre there, and he worked with the likes of, you know, Peter O'Toole and Emma Thompson's mother, Phyllida Law, Gene Wilder. Like he was a really incredible person. Came to Vancouver and wanted to start a theater school. So that became known as Studio 58, which is kind of the premier theater school in Canada, other than the National Theater School in Eastern Canada. So he had a huge influence, not only in my life, but the lives of a lot of creative people. He was a big student of Krishnamurti and Marcus Aurelius, so we got along super well. And towards the end of his life, it was very difficult to get any kind of insurance for film or theater people. So he just did his own thing. He wrote a play, and so I helped manage him for those years. And we got all these gigs all over, and I got to travel and to him to do these things. But Anthony was just a very, very talented creative, and really launched the careers, I think, of a lot of actors that we know in Canada who attended his program. So yeah,
It
so yeah,
was a 3-year program,
yeah, it was a 3-year program. Yeah.
and you were a graduate of that
Yeah,
program.
graduate. So when he was forced to retire, he started another school. And so that was related to Studio 58 because it had every component of it. It was called Presentation House. So that program was just a huge highlight in my life. So 2 years in a study program of your own self and your own soul, really, and then 1 year in a company. So he was very, very instrumental.
and other people that crossed your path, this synchrodestiny again. Another one that we have a piece of it in common because my hometown is Boulder, Colorado. And this picture that was in the reminder email is of you and Robin Williams.
Yeah, yeah. So one of my jobs early in my 20s was working at Punchlines Comedy Club, and it really worked well because I could still do my theater, but also I could work in the evenings there. So when Robin Williams was making the movie Jumanji, um, he would come to the club every Thursday night to do 1 hour of comedy and 1 hour of improv. And he did this out of his own heart of bringing up the vibration. He was very grateful to comedy clubs who had launched his career, but also he wanted to be that mentor. Like, I don't know if he saw himself doing that, but that's what he did. And so for the 4 months or 5 months, it was every Thursday night. And he'd come in, just when the show was starting, I'd have to take him into this lovely space that we had created for him, get him his Perrier water, have some conversation, just, do what needed to be done in preparation for the show. So we did have a lot of conversations and we had a lot of interactions. And by far, of all the comedians that I ever met, and I started there in 1981, so I worked 16 years there. It was a long time. I
But this
saw
is a
some,
career in itself.
yeah, that's right. So that was the early days of stand-up when there was no HBO and there was, so by far Robin Williams of all the comedians was the most generous, the most humble. I would say highly attuned to his own spiritual nature. He may not have used that word, but definitely I just have such high praise for not only his creative genius, but his intelligence and understanding of those around him.
And of course, the show that I related to was Mork and Mindy,
Yes,
which
yes,
was based out of Boulder,
yes,
Colorado.
yes,
And I used to walk by that house
yes,
often and always thought of Mork and Mindy,
yeah,
Robin Williams. And it's another example of um, the complexities of life
yes,
because in Robin Williams dealt with the same issues of alcohol abuse and that demon within his own being. And ultimately, one of the sorrows was that he chose to go through the veils.
Mhm,
And that, I believe, is a soul choice also.
mhm.
And
Yeah, yes. I would say too, Marge, though, like when I knew him, that was not a part of his life. Like that the incident with John Belushi when John Belushi died really changed him, and he in that moment quit everything. So I did not know that part of him. And I know later on, I guess, you hear things and all that, but I also know too that there seemed to be some undiagnosed situation that came out afterwards. So however he went through the veil, as you said, the veil is the veil. When it's our time, it's our time. And so I I know that he's doing greater work
yeah,
um, for us in the light. Yeah.
and you can still tune into him.
Oh my goodness.
And
Goodness.
so I love the fact that your life, even though you had this unity background imprinted from your early childhood that so profoundly influenced you in leadership, and you were friends of many of the people that I knew in ministry, like Rick Rogers,
Yes.
and and yet you didn't end up in ministerial school. You didn't end up becoming a unity minister. You chose arts and all of the pieces of arts, art and music and comedy. Lighten up.
Yeah, lighten up. Well, I've actually been doing them in tandem. So I have this creative arts side, but I have my unity side as well. And so I, unity being such a way of life, I actually have and did my LUT C classes. And I worked at the Unity Center for all with Pete and Freddie Paris, who were also instrumental in my life, who were Jack Boland's associate ministers. So I worked for almost 10 years with them, and I was their assistant, and I was going through the whole Unity program in tandem with what I was doing creatively as well. I was doing a lot. And so now I'm even pursuing to ensure that that is something that I do is to get that designation, because I really believe that we are all ministers. Every person is a minister, and we are anointed in that way. And so people always say, "Oh, you're a unity minister," and I'm like, well, I guess we could call ourselves all unity minister, but you have to go through certain things. So I'm in the process of securing that at the
So
moment.
you're going to become a unity minister. And
Well, I have a wonderful friend named Sandra Campbell, and so what she's doing at the Urban Ministry is just an incredible program. So it allows you to have a lot more flexibility as well, because I believe that both these things are so entwined. Like Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, they were such creatives. What they created in the Unity movement was not like anything else. And they studied all of these things, all of these practices, all of these wisdom teachings to take them to this thing called unity. So, yeah.
it's fascinating because you're still young.
Yes, I am. I am never, I am young.
And my former husband, who's now passed through the veils, was in his 60s when
Oh,
he applied to
oh,
ministerial
wow.
school after Paul Timon was his name, and after a very, very successful career in mining, uh, flying all around the world, building international plants in the mining industry. And so he was 63 when he applied for ministerial school. And uh, one of the questions someone asked him on his admission interviews was about his age. And he simply said, "Well, how old was Moses when he was called?" And that ended that line of questions.
Yes, yes, yes. So then after working with Pete and Freddie Paris, who really changed the whole trajectory of even Unity of Vancouver in terms of wanting it to be a hub, a a place of gathering, a place where all kinds of programs were going on. And so at one point, I think, well, I was doing part of my job was volunteer coordinating. We had over 200 volunteers minimum, and every one of them was in a small group. Every one of them was thriving. Everyone was there Wednesdays and Sundays as well as, other days of the week. So it was really, really thriving. And then when they left, I actually ended up working with Marvin and Catherine Anderson, and that was almost 2 years.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And tell me about Marvin. Of course, the way I knew him best was as a teacher and when I was in ministerial school. And that profound influence has shaped my entire life. This is the key to everything. My
Yeah.
whole book is started out with that. The meditation gardens at Unity in Tustin represent those. And then uh, Marvin was profoundly important in my life. I don't think he had any idea of the way that I felt about our connection because I never told him. I wasn't one of his favorite students necessarily. Uh, Everyone knew who they were. I wasn't in the in group. And yet it happened anyway. This profound vibrational experience that just ignited a vastness within me. And tell me about Marvin and what
And
you
so,
remember about his teaching.
yeah, so Marvin was a professor of metaphysics. There isn't anybody that I can think of. I mean, I studied with Frank and Martha Judici, who I also believe were huge metaphysic, you know, they were leaders in that field as well. I mean, Ed Rabel, Eric Butterworth, like these were all metaphysical mentors, really. And yeah, forgot to mention Ed Rabel. He actually was at the Unity Center for a short while in Vancouver during a transition period. But anyways, that's a whole other show. But Marvin was, I believe, a highly sensitive to everything around him. I almost felt like there was an antenna that was on top of his head and he was picking up all the signals. He had the ability to pick up on the subtleties of the human experience and translate them into metaphysical teachings. And he did that through, as you know, the creative process, which was something that he would start, in the new year, and it would go right through so that we actually had a cycle of our spiritual evolution. And if we look now today at what Charles and Myrtle were doing with science and spirituality coming together, that there is no separation, that he was a master. I mean, the place was bursting at the seams with people wanting to come and hear these metaphysical teachings beyond the word. And the word is love. I mean, that word was breathed into the world in the beginning, but beyond the word. And that's what Charles and Myrtle were doing. I mean, revealing word, just read that book and you'll see, geez, Marvin could go to any place in the Revealing Word or the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. And he would give that definition and probably even a more expanded version of that. So working with someone like that requires a lot of your own personal commitment to your spiritual life because you're seeing it all around you. It brings you up. It raises your vibration.
It brings you up.
That's
It's
right.
not about you achieving anything. It's
That's
not
right.
about you striving for anything.
Yeah.
It's not about goal setting.
Yes.
It's none of that. It,
Yes.
you simply open to the downloads that are
Yes.
given to you
Yeah.
when you're willing to be in that openness.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're not willing, if you don't believe it, it won't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I invite everybody that's here today and everyone that will listen to this recording, be open to the downloads. Those downloads are coming fast and furious. And if Marvin were alive today, and he's always alive in our consciousness, uh, his message would be, be able to be all over the world with what he was teaching at that time. And we have new teachers that are coming in now, but there's something about those foundational messages of high vibration that Marvin did so well. And him and Catherine, his beloved, they worked really well together because, of course, he could really focus on that part, which was a ministry in itself. And Catherine could work on the rest of the things that needed to be done on a daily basis, and then to add the team to support those things happening. I mean, he was so specific that even on a Sunday morning, he would have his message, but Catherine would be working with him and the music director. And we still have the same music director. She is awesome. Look her up, Beverly Elliott, a very well-known actress and singer. You can see her if you Google her. They would work on the music, so it wasn't just music. It was applying the principles of what he was teaching to the creative process of music, which would then vibrate higher within the center when a Sunday morning was happening.
And all of these things came together in your life in amazing, amazing ways. It's almost as if you were a, a channel.
Hmm.
And you were a receptacle for this experience of vibration coming into form. And then you brought it into arts and music and comedy even.
Yes, yes, yeah, and TED Talks. I'm very, very involved in TEDx Talks. We have a big event coming up on Saturday, and I get to curate and find those speakers that have an idea we're spreading. Charles and Myrtle have an idea we're spreading. Marvin had an idea we're spreading. Every single person in this call right now has an idea worth spreading and sharing. It's beautiful.
And so it profoundly important TEDx, the TED Talks, and you were part of that. You are part of that,
Mhm,
and you're still part of that.
mhm,
And bringing that into the integration with your unity awareness
mhm,
is profoundly beautiful.
mhm.
You're also currently on the board of directors at Unity of Vancouver.
Mhm.
And Unity of Vancouver has been a center of light for many, many years. And Marvin was part of that. And you are also the person on the board who works with the team relative to programming. So
Yes.
do you have a full-time minister? I don't think, do you now?
Right at the moment, we do not have a minister. We've gone to a model of kind of a faculty model where we're bringing in Unity ministers. That's how we came across Sandra. So whether they're in person or on Zoom, these are people that teach wisdom traditions and teachings. And we do our best to find our Unity ministers because, of course, we're a Unity center, but we also bring in like an Eastern yoga teacher who can best bring forward Christ consciousness teachings through yoga. So she's able to speak to that. So we bring in a First Nations, our First Nations community. I have a gal that's going to come in. Her name is Jana Whale, and she's a climate change. But she said our relationship to the land is where the true healing happens. And I think that's so aligned with Unity, with starting as a farm too. Like Unity did it all. They didn't forget the land. They didn't forget the people. They didn't forget the bees. They didn't forget any of it. And so she can come in and say it in her way, but then it's foundational unity. So we have a mix of who we bring in, and that alignment is critical, which is why you do have to have some understanding of what the congregation and the participants need.
It's amazing. We're going through a shift right now
Yes.
in this realm. The human realm and the spiritual realm are shifting from the fourth dimension into the fifth dimension, and it's happening. I didn't understand that until I opened myself to understanding some of the history and the research that has been by people who deeply understand astrology. I'm still a novice.
Mhm.
I'm dabbling. But I find that I can read about the transits and I can see them happening in my own life. I can see the squares with the rough edges and how it's requiring shift and change and review and in the retrogrades. Uh, and we are going to be going through this for the next several years. We are going through a period of time of dismantling in this country. And I am shocked. I did not expect this, to have the great dismantler being inaugurated for the second time on the anniversary of Martin Luther King Day. I mean, there's cosmic humor in this. I have no idea, but what I said about this call today is that we're going to stay in, we're sticking with, I am sticking with uncertainty. And I
Mhm.
think we're in a time of uncertainty as far as human understanding. We're in a,
Keep going.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know what the trump card is in a deck of cards. What's the trump card?
Is that the fool?
No, the trump card, you can use it for anything, right? Like the trump card is something you can, so I always say that God trumps everything. That's my motto. You know, we have to believe that and remember that as this realignment and reconfiguration is happening. I mean, at one time we followed the North Star. I have a friend who's an astrology teacher who can take every single scripture and align it with numbers and astrology. She has that talent and ability, and she's been doing it her whole life. So each person is bringing to the table their gift. Everyone has a holy grail, and what you choose to drink from is what you choose to drink from. And we are being called to a higher vibration.
And it's going to shift from top down to bottom up.
Yep.
And that shift, it's fascinating that you talk about, well, we're following a faculty model.
Yeah.
That is the perfect choice for this kind of shift. And it's very interesting to me. I wrote a credo paper for Marvin Anderson when I was in ministerial school. And then always after writing the credo, he would call us in and we would talk about our credos. And he called me in and said to me, you know, this is really a good credo. There's only one problem with it, Marge. And I said, really? Thank you for the compliment of telling me it's really good. What's the problem? And he said, the problem is it will not work.
Wow.
And I said, oh. And I didn't resist his comment or argue with him. I just said, oh. And then I was called into the field, first to Unity of Walnut Creek, which had an amazing
Mhm.
educational program.
Mhm.
And I was the senior minister there for 2 years.
Mhm.
And then my next ministry, which was the only other ministry that um, I ultimately landed in, was Unity of Tustin, where I was the senior minister for 19 years.
Wow.
At Unity of Tustin, I implemented all of the pieces of my credo.
Wow. Wow.
And it was a faculty model. I
Yeah.
called it a campus of consciousness.
I love that, a campus of consciousness.
Yes, and brought in master teachers from all over the world.
Yeah.
And Adyashanti was there before he was famous.
Wow. That's wonderful.
Ethel came
Yes.
before he was famous.
Yeah.
Ram Dass
Yes.
came,
Yes.
and he, he he had just gone through his stroke and he was suffering from aphasia. And Roger Walsh told me about him and had done a benefit for him because Ram Dass had given away all of his money. And and I said, I want him to come. Will you tell him to come to Unity? Give him my invitation. He said, I will. I'm not sure he will because he has this experience of aphasia and he goes into these blank places where he can't remember. And I said, let me talk with him. And he called and
Wow.
said he wasn't sure because of the aphasia experience. And I said, oh, you don't have to worry about that here. We know how to surf the silence. We are deeply involved in meditation.
Yes.
If you go into an experience of aphasia, we'll just surf the silence with you.
Wow. That is so beautiful.
And he came. He started at 7 o'clock. We had sold every seat in the sanctuary, overflow into the youth education rooms that were live streamed into there. And as our regular service at night, timing was 7 to 9. At 9 o'clock, some people got up and from their reserved seats and left the sanctuary. And there were ushers that brought in people from the overflow rooms. He spoke until 11 o'clock,
Wow.
from 7 o'clock until 11
Yeah.
o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we paused and he said, I'm willing to sign books.
Wow.
We went over to Victoria House and he signed books until 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
This
Raising
is
up.
what happens.
Raising up.
Yeah, a shift happens, and
Yes.
all of this medical diagnosis of aphasia simply dissolved.
Yes.
And surfing the silence was part of it.
Yes.
And John Welshans, one of his close friends, said he used that term from the time that you talked about it.
Wow.
Surfing the silence.
Well, there's a synchronistic thing. Our son woke up. He also was working in the film industry with, his handiwork of also doing carpentry and things. And he came, they had a little bit of a break between shows. And he came to me and he said, Mom, he said, I'm gonna go see Ram Dass. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he said, Mom, I had a dream and Ron came to me. He got on he got on the computer, booked a flight to Maui to this event that he did once a year. There were no tickets, there were no rooms. And I just trust Brandon, he knows what he's doing. And basically, he went to Maui, and within like 3 minutes of getting there, he had a place to stay and he had a ticket to the event. Now, how do you explain those things other than I highly recommend that when we listen to our intuition and we listen to that world that comes, as you say, in the silence, comes in a moment, comes in a download, if we listen, we will take the right steps, even when our head is trying to argue with us. I call it our diseased ego. We need an ego enough so we don't walk in front of a bus. But we also have that part of our egoic self that wants to rationalize and challenge what spirit is asking us to do. So we got to see him a few weeks before he passed, really. He died shortly after that, but that's one of Brandon's great spiritual moments.
It's amazing. And we're at the time where we need to
Yes.
do the break toward sharing and inviting people to share their own aha moments. And so before we do that, I want to remind everyone that this entire program of conversations with some of the lights of the great lights of the universe is love donation based. I am totally committed to Myrtle Fillmore's model of love donation. And it's not about money, it's about love. And so I invite you to go to the website or in the email. There's a place where you can donate and click on that button. And it goes through PayPal, although you can use your own credit card through PayPal in order to do that. And so I invite you to consider becoming part of the supporting energy of Called by Love Institute and these conversations with amazing souls. And then the one thing that I also want to do if there's any time left over, is come back and have you share just a little bit about some of your spiritual journeys and the yew trees. So, um, I, the other thing that I want to let you know about is that next month in February, on February 19th, our guest is going to be Robert Brummett, who is an amazing Unity minister and one of the key lead teachers at the Temple Buddhist Center at Unity on the Plaza, and it's a Unity Temple on the Plaza. And Robert is going to be with us for this call as our spotlight guest next week, next month in February. So many of you will recognize Robert Brummett's picture, and he will be our guest in February. And I'm hoping, Janet, you and Jim Valla will be back.
Yeah, we will come back. And Robert Brummett was one of my teachers, and yeah, he is a really amazing soul.
The incredible gift of me coming back to Kansas City has been that Sandra Campbell has been the associate minister on the Unity side, and uh, Robert Brummett has been in that other key role as a key teacher on the Buddhist side. So let's shift into the open time for people who are willing to share. Would love to have some of you share, and one or two of you, and you can just raise your hand, or you can do it at the bottom of your computer where it says raise hand. And Garth, is there anyone? I see that one person made a comment in the chat. Is there anything that we need to know about relative to chat?
Oh, okay. Good morning, or it's good afternoon, I guess there. I wanted to ask you a question about what you said about 20 minutes into the conversation. You said the spiritual nature is the most important thing, and I was wondering if you could maybe say a little more about that.
Yeah, so I should probably clarify that we are spiritual beings having the human experience. So for myself, if I don't acknowledge my conscious contact with the divine upon awakening, I find that my day goes in a very different direction, Marla. So I have that commitment just to acknowledge that I am being led by spirit. So when it comes to any situation, and most specifically, I'll just relate it to when I got that diagnosis. Like, it is so easy to focus on what is happening out there as opposed to what is happening in here, and remembering that I am a child of the divine, that I'm expressing as a child of divine, and that's what I meant by that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I just kind of agreed that it sounded like something that was really important, that it's the most important, maybe it's almost the only thing.
Yes,
also.
it is.
I was also wondering about your son. Does he have any children?
No, but he is very much seeking to have a life partner and children, and that's kind of on his radar right at the moment.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let me just add a little bit to your inquiry, and that's a wonderful question,
Yes,
Mark.
it is.
And in Unity, they have what they call a Trinity. And that Trinity is spirit, and it's like a funnel. Spirit is the vastness.
Yeah.
And then the next level of it, as it funnels down, is soul. And that the soul, the spirit is infinite and eternal. The soul is infinite and eternal, but it's connected. And scripture says, these are the words of Jesus, I will send you a comforter. The Holy Spirit is that comforter. And so if we connect with the Holy Spirit, we're connecting with our soul. And I love what Janet is saying. Every single morning, that's the way I start my day. Every single night, that's the way I go to sleep. And uh, and then the funnel comes down to the human rational mind, idea, expression, and that's where we can create with our human mind and our rational mind. But if we are not open to the soul and to spirit, what we're creating from is the tip at the bottom of the tunnel, and the funnel is blocked because it requires willingness, our human willingness to make the choice to let spirit guide us, to let the Holy Spirit show us the way. And so this brings me back to that question I said to you, Janet. I want you to think about this. If you could describe in 1 or 2 words what your entire life has been, what the only purpose of your life is, do you know what those 1 or 2 words would be? So
Janet Law, you know what it would be? It sounds really weird, but it's a Janet Law, because if we look at what the description of the word Janet is, I think that my mother and father gave me that name that came through spirit and soul. Janet is the feminine of John, and John represents love and God's gift. So I believe that I live by God's law, which is the law of the universe. Like
I love that.
every other law is just you know, a piece of the greater law, but without that greater law, then understanding that is the law. So yeah, love law. I like to live by love law because that's to me what spirit is. That's to me what my whole existence is about. If I'm not out in the world expressing love, even in the moments when I am being called to judge or criticize or feel guilty, or all of those human emotions and character defenses, then I have a different experience.
The other interesting thing for me is that this, all it requires is a little willingness. If we're not willing, if we say, oh, I don't believe that, we have shut it off. There's no way. It will not negate our choice. In our human will can make that choice. And it may take 1,000 lifetimes. It's why the Course in
Yeah.
Miracles says 1 act of forgiveness can save you 1,000 lifetimes.
So Jack Boland, we'll go back to that for a minute, was a huge mentor of this triangle. He understood it deeply. And he developed the mastermind prayer based on the question that you're asking, Marla, actually. So what he discovered was when people would come in for spiritual counseling, that if they could only see the view through the human experience, they would have a very difficult time finding a solution to what it was that was distressing them. So what he discovered was there was a series of steps that people could go through to get them into this place of the spirit soul environment, where that is where you were generating the energy of your human problem. Because unless we are willing, unless we surrender to this spirit And we believe that there is a power greater than ourselves and that we are willing to be changed, and then we decide to be changed when we get to the step of forgiveness, which is the fifth step of the mastermind. We allow, when we forgive, which means forgiving ourselves and anyone else that is a block in our spiritual evolution, when we are willing to give that up, we allow the law of circulation to move and breathe and have its being. So when we get to step 6 of the mastermind prayer, which is we affirmatively ask for what it is that we are most in this moment asking for. And then we give thanks, and then we dedicate our life to this spirit. Again, it's a circle. So I believe that we came together today, this group, in a very special formation. This formation may never be this formation again, but for whatever reason, we are all called here. And so the mastermind prayer is based in when 2 or more are gathered, spirit is in the midst. Something has happened here that has changed us. And Marla, you asking that question was such an important piece of what we are speaking about today.
Yeah, I want to ask my last question. You said something about I never heard before. You called it the autumn Kara, and I thought Kara.
Autumn Kara, yeah, C-A-R-A, Kara. That's Irish. Autumn Kara, yeah.
It's about a group, right? It's about people in a group, autumn Kara.
Yeah, so it kind of became more well known with a wonderful poet theologian named John O'Donohue. And John O'Donohue wrote the book Autumn Kara because this is something that has been exhibited in the wisdom tradition of Celtic spirituality. And so he wanted to put that down in print. And I highly recommend, if you get an opportunity, to look the book up because it's about how we belong. You know, we are always in the house of belonging if we choose to see it that way. And so Anam Cara is about creating more experiences like that. Like we created a circle today called an Anam Cara. Prayer circle, love circle. But I like the term Anam Cara because everyone is a soul friend, even when we don't think it's a soul friend. Even when our mind says, oh, that couldn't be a soul friend, for whatever reason, we're being brought together in a certain formation. So
thank you. Have a perfect day. Thank you.
thank you, Carla. Thank you.
And Sandra Campbell.
Well, hello, Marge. Hello there, Janet. I miss
Hello.
Vancouver.
We miss you.
There is a magic around Vancouver and in Vancouver. So if you've never been, those of you who are on, please make it a point to get there. I just want to say I am so inspired by this conversation. And one of the things you mentioned, I was pulling into the driveway when you were talking about the veil. And I often talk to people, especially who have experienced the loss of a loved one, about that veil being thinner and getting thinner all the time. I think the veil has already always been thin. I just think our realization, our awareness of the veil makes it seem thinner. And as we are focusing on that, we're reminded that no one who's ever been here is gone. And I think you hinted at that, you know, the spirit. And when Marge talked about the Trinity, the metaphysical interpretation of the Trinity, the spirit never dies. The soul of us is permanent. It's the body that's temporary. So I don't know if you have any more words about that you'd like to share, but I was really enthralled by that conversation.
Are you going to speak to that, or do you want me to speak to it, Marge?
Go ahead, Janet.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I believe that the veil between here and other dimensions is always available to us if we choose. I think what's happened is there's been a waking up people so that they can see that they can actually have access to that at any time, in any moment. Like I feel I'm sitting here right now, but I feel like I'm in many different time dimensions at the same time, in that, you know, just the dimension of being able to be in all the places that you're at is kind of a physical demonstration of that, but I think it goes beyond that, Sandra. I think it's like you think about somebody and they call you. You're someone, random event in your life all of a sudden becomes very clear as you're waking up one morning. Like, to me, that's the veil. And that's the learning. Like, if that's happening, how do I respond to that? I think it's our response to the veil that is really critical in these times right now. We are going through a lot on this planet. And when I was in Guggenbara, which I'll come back and talk about sometime with the yew trees and everything, there is a silence there. I call it the slip stream of the silence. It's the quietest moment that I ever experienced, other than a near-death experience that I had. But this slipstream of the silence is the key to this veil, I think, to having access to it in an even more profound way, Sandra. That's what I believe. I'm sticking to it.
That's beautiful, so profoundly beautiful. And because I mentioned that last picture of your journey to Ireland, and the yew trees, of course, are there. Just briefly fill us in on that last picture in the announcement email.
Well, for a very long time in my dreams, I would go to this place and I didn't know where it was, but it was very familiar to me. And it looked exactly like that picture. And then I came across a woman a few years ago who is a Celtic spiritual teacher in the ways of the Brehon Law. And the Brehon Law is the law of creation. In Irish tradition, the law of creation is about our oneness with everything. There is no disconnection. So if we talk about the Druids and how they practiced it, it was all about our connection to nature and to people and to everything. There's no separateness. So I would go to this place, and then I was talking to the woman who is my teacher, and her name is Diana Beresford Kroger, and she's a tree steward on the planet, but scientist, botanist, just an amazing individual, written many books and has done a movie called The Call of the Forest. So we were talking about this, and she said, I know where you are. And she told me and explained it all to me in such detail. And then I went there and I went, because that's where she goes in her dreams too. And it's this very ancient place. I call it a vortex in Ireland. And it was a place where people gathered for prayer. And they had these prayer huts. They kind of look like little beehives, and you go into them. And you would pray for hours or meditate for hours, and then there was a monastery beside it. So that picture of Guggenbara is a place that I go to quite often.
And you go there in the stillness, in the silence,
In the
not in
silence.
an airplane, although
right.
at that one point,
Yes,
when
I
you
did finally
took the
go.
picture, you went in the airplane.
I did, yeah. But I go there in the slipstream of the silence. It's a
I
moment.
love that
It
phrase.
was slipstream of the silence. And when we go into these states of silence, which one of my very wonderful teachers at Unity Village came in, and it was Jim Gauthier was teaching that class. And we were in the chapel and we went in and he said, okay, everybody put your books down. And everybody around was like really not too happy about that because they were there to learn something about prayer and meditation. And he said, unless you can experience the silence, we don't have a class. And so we sat in the silence for over an hour, and people were very triggered by that. I just went into the moment and remembered the silence and came out with some great gifts because of that silence. So sometimes we have to put the books down and just be in the silence. Yeah.
This has been moments of pure joy, Janet, in having you here with us today. It's just an immense gift. And thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for all that you have brought and all that you've shared. And it's quite amazing because all of this happened because Sandra Campbell and I had a conversation, and she was going to Vancouver. And I said, be sure and ask Janet if she knew Marvin Anderson and Jim Ball.
Mhm.
A simple question. And all of a sudden, you and I have an Anam Cara,
Anam Cara, A-N-A-M, Cara.
I
Yeah.
actually have the book.
Yes.
And one of the things that I love about your story, you sent me the picture of a mustard seed,
Oh,
and
yeah, I love that.
I wanted to share with you. This is a thing that I used when I was teaching, and every time I taught about mustard seeds, I would hold this out
Oh, wow.
and invite people to take a few and actually put it in their mouth and swallow it.
Oh,
If you have faith as a mustard seed, I said, take it in.
not very much, is it? How big is a mustard seed, Marge?
Oh, it's tiny, tiny, tiny. And you said you have a gift from was it from your
My
mother?
mom, yeah, they used to make them and sell them at Unity, and they were little glass balls with a mustard seed inside them and a chain. And so yeah, that was kind of something I wore a lot, particularly in my teenage years. Got a lot of questions about it.
And hopefully we'll be back with Janet and maybe Jim Bollet
Oh
in
yeah.
and
Uh,
in the meantime, much, much love and deep, deep gratitude. And it has been blessing upon blessing having you here with us today.
This has been great, and I want to acknowledge all of these people that are here. I would really love it if you could just do a gallery view, Garth, so I can see everybody's beautiful faces. There we go. Good, good, good.
So,
Right.
Patty, did you want to say hi?
Hi, I apologize. I'm here in Orange County where you have to hold your hat on with the wind howling. It, all my favorite things are bagged up at my front door in case I have to evacuate. And it's made me realize all the extra stuff I don't need that I can donate and get rid of now. It's been like a cleansing process. And Marge, I think of our silent meditation retreat that you did there at Unity Village. It was what you've done several that were week-long silent meditation retreats, and
Oh, and so many of them also at different retreat centers. So
yeah.
week-long silent meditation retreats with 5 1-hour sits every single day.
Yeah.
But
This
Marge, would you be willing just to do a quick prayer for Patty and all of our family in Los Angeles right now? If we could just do that, that would sure, you know, be a
And
good
so
thing.
we hold everyone that is in the experience of fire in Los Angeles to hold them in the light, hold them in the realms of safety. And even those that have had to evacuate, and even those that have lost everything, we simply hold that in a vaster awareness and know that there are endings and beginnings. And this is, in some way, somehow, the living flame of love sent John of the Cross talked about the living flame of love. And let that living flame burn in each of our hearts, in our souls, simply dissolving that which is not necessary for us to carry forward, simply inviting us to see the vastness, to see the love, to see the light. Let there be light. The first day of the creation story, as taught by Marvin Anderson. And so we simply say, let there be light. And God said, it is good. And so goodbye, beautiful ones. We'll see you next month.